Here at Going Now, we're big fans of Multiverse, if you can't already tell. And when we were asked if we wanted to help get the word out about Multiverse and the many facets of it and the many people involved, of course we jumped at the chance to do so. And in doing so, we've created this great show for you here that you're going to see. And so, what is Multiverse? Well, here is the great Jesse Adams to tell you all about it.
We are a convention for fans from all backgrounds, any fans of science fiction, fantasy, horror, gaming, art, and generally just anything geeky at all. That's been one of the fun parts, is expanding outside of like traditional fandom, and because we realize that like people have different kind of stuff they nerd out about, right? It could be history or science or fountain pens, whatever it is. The common thread is that there's a strong interest in something that you want to share with people. So that's the point of conventions in my book, but also Multiverse in particular, is let everybody get together in an environment where everybody feels welcomed and included, like genuinely included. And it happens every October, third weekend of every October. This year, it's October 20th through 22nd. In Atlanta, which I figure most people know, at the Westin Atlanta Perimeter North. All the stuff's at multiversecon.org.
For this episode, we welcome in Sarah J. Sover. Sarah is an urban fantasy author who has her Fractured Face series featured through Falstaff Books. She's also been a panelist at Multiverse and a vendor, where she has those wonderful signed copies that y'all can get if you attend Multiverse this year. Then we're going to talk to Dee Norman. Dee is an author and a witch who was raised in her family's Italian-American magical tradition. Her book is Burn a Black Candle, an Italian-American grimoire. She's also the first person on this show that we get to talk to about the Learn track, and so we'll pick her brain about exactly what that is all about. Then, what do you say we meet up? I know a great place, and it's at Multiverse, and I'll tell you more about that a little bit later. So get ready for another great spotlight on the Multiverse Convention with your host, Joe Compton. Hello, everybody. Yes, it's another episode of Spotlight on the Multiverse. I'm super excited to have my guests here tonight, starting with the awesome Sarah. Sarah, I have a confession to make. I had to record your name like 4 times because I want to put a T in it so badly. I want to say Stover so many times. I don't know if that happens to you a lot.
So you know what I tell people? It's like sober, but not quite.
But yeah, so already off the bat, I'm getting off on the wrong foot and making confessionals. But it's nice to have you here. Thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
I gave a little bit of an intro there, but tell everybody a little bit about yourself, a little bit more than what I did.
Okay. I am the author of, as you said, the Fractured Face series, which Fairy Godmurder released last year. Fade to Black will be coming out later this year. I don't know if it'll be out in time for Multiverse or not, but fingers crossed. I also have the comedic fantasy, Double Crossing the Bridge was my debut novel. And then I write some nonfiction articles for Writer's Digest magazine, and Dan Cobalt's putting the fact in fantasy.
Nice. Awesome. And you've been to how many multiverses? Have you been to all of them?
No, I think I missed the first one.
Okay.
So what number are we on?
This will be the 5th one, I believe. Because
okay, I've been to 4.
There's a live, a virtual, then the last 2 were live.
Okay. Okay. I've been to the last 2, and I went to, and I.
So you and I are in the same fraternity, because that's basically, I did the last 2 as well. I visited the virtual one. I didn't get to participate, but
right. Yeah, I did not participate in the virtual one, and I went to, I think I was at the one before the virtual one. I could be wrong. No, don't quote me on that.
No, you're a frequenter of many conferences. You go to many conventions. You do a lot of vending at these conventions as well. I'm kind of curious what your take is on Multiverse. What makes you keep coming back? What do you love about it?
Oh, you've probably asked this question to a few people, and you probably get the same answer a lot, which is the diversity.
Yeah.
And so a lot of conventions strive to have to appeal to diverse audiences and have diverse panelists and guests and stuff. And a lot of them don't do the work required to make that a reality, where Multiverse does. I've been to so many conventions where it's like they'll have some panels about representation in fantasy or the importance of diversity in sci-fi, and they don't have enough panelists from those marginalizations to fill out the panel. And it feels like, I'm not saying you shouldn't have those panels. Those are important panels, or important conversations. But number one, when you do that and you only have one Black author guest, and you only have maybe one trans author guest, and then you put them on every one of these panels, they're now pigeonholed, and this is all they get to talk about the entire convention. And you don't have enough others there, you're not really solving the problem, which is making our fandoms accessible to everybody. And obviously, Multiverse has been great about getting out there and getting the word out there and saying, this is what we're doing. And not only are you welcome here, but we want you here, to all these different groups. And it's been just kind of a beautiful thing to watch happen. And that's probably my favorite thing about Multiverse. And
yeah, it's very inclusive, and it's very much feels like family homeliness too. And it's not just that there is diversity, but it's that we embrace each other in a loving manner. And it's really interesting. It's really fascinating. Going to bigger cons, obviously there's such a separation with that aspect of that idea, but even with the more intimate ones that are smaller that I've been to beyond Multiverse, there's just still there's kind of a wall, or a visible wall, or a separation, it seems like. But with Multiverse, it doesn't feel like that.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like like I said, when you have people from all these different marginalizations only being allowed to talk about their marginalizations, because you don't have that at Multiverse, you can go and you can hear authors that you love and want to get to know talking about the things that they love and the things they want to share with you, not just this one almost like reason why they were brought there, it feels like, at some places. And yeah. Sorry, I could harp on that for a while.
No, appreciate that. I mean, you've done a lot of panels there. You've done some panels there, and what has been your favorite? What do you look forward to every year that you get positioned with, and you try to get on every year?
I think my favorite thing I just discovered last year, which was the bedtime stories.
Oh yeah. Well, that was the first year they did it. Was last year. That was the first year that they did it. So.
Oh, was it? Okay, yeah. That was so much fun. Just in case you don't know, the authors get to read a portion of their book, and they ask for audience members, and they say how many people they need in the scene, and audience members volunteer, and they come up and they can win prizes by acting out the scene as the author is reading it. It's incredibly distracting for the author, especially when they are so hilarious. But it's a whole lot of fun.
Were you a reader last year? I must have missed that one.
Yes, I did read last year, and
that had been awesome.
I read a scene from Fairy Godmurder, and I asked for 6 people to come up. And I'm sitting here in my head, I'm like, who's going to be what? Who's going to be what? And then, do you know Tonya Ransom?
Yeah, sure.
She walks up, and I was like, oh, you're Gwen. And she looked at me, she's like, okay. By the end of it, I'm trying to convince her. I'm trying to convince John to hire her to do my audiobooks.
Nice. We do have some people out there. We have Paige out there. Hello,
Hi,
Paige. AF Stewart's with us. Sean Hillman's here.
Hi,
nice to see you all. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. And if you have any questions, I don't say this often enough, but if you do have questions out there, just let me know and I'll bring them in, and no problem. We were talking about Hills to Die On. Have you done that panel yet? Have you done the Hill to Die On?
I have not.
I have not either. I've been wanting to do that one, and the problem. I mean, the problem with any convention is that you have to manage your time, and you have to figure out what you want to do when you do it. And oftentimes, when you repeat, you kind of change your schedule to do other things. And But all those really fun ones are all roped together at the same time. And even at Multiverse, I was going from story time back to the Monster Mash back and forth. So I kept going back and forth through that, and it's very interesting. But the cool thing about it is how close they are to one another. So you can do that. But
I got put on Monster Mash once too.
Yeah, I was gonna say I thought you were that first year that you were there then. That you did that.
No, that was the year before last, so it was my second time in person.
Okay.
And I did not realize how deep they were going to dig with some of those monsters. So I spent the entire time. I ended up being like research girl because I'm like, I don't know. Let me figure out like, these specific facts about these monsters. Until they mentioned Gremlins. We were talking beforehand about movies, and that someone mentioned Gremlins versus Critters, and I was like, all of a sudden, those 3 beers that somebody handed me earlier all kicked in at once, and I was like, I like hit the table and jumped up. It's like, I got this.
We've had a lot of conversations about Monster Mash here. I had Mark Abbott here. I've had Lisa Wood here. I had Darren here last week, and we talked about it, and he said the same thing, like how deep the dive goes and how difficult it can be if you don't know the monster, and you kind of, but there is kind of this unique thing where you get to kind of express your inner actor a little bit and play, or your inner debater even, you get to, because it is part knowing the monster and knowing its strengths and weaknesses, but it's also part acting and performing, and
right,
getting
which is not my strong point, honestly. And so I'm over here. I'm like, I don't want to be the speaker. Oh my God, say this. So.
Paige says, he, Sarah. I think that was for your reading there. Let the track directors know which panel you're interested in. Yeah, I mean, it's just hard because a lot of the ones I like are right next to each other usually, or at the same time. But my partner in shenanigans.
I have to tell you, if we get a chance, I'll tell you what that's about.
Well, I think you're going to be at Con Carolinas next week, right?
I am, yes.
Yeah, so will I. So we'll talk about it because I'm gonna hang out with Paige a little bit during that time too. So
Paige is fabulous. I hope they let her do the belly dance stuff again. That was fun.
All right,
she did now belly dance class, and Misty joined in, and it was fantastic. I want to do it again.
Nice.
Hopefully, I don't have any panels that conflict with it.
Awesome. So I mean, do you and then you're with Falstaff, so you probably man the table, I would imagine, a couple times during
not the Falstaff table. I usually have my own table.
Cool, nice, awesome. Do you so talk about vending at Multiverse for you. What is different for you as versus like you did the Ren Fair last week? So what's different from that? Those different. Is it
those are entirely different beasts.
What's that?
Those are entirely different beasts.
Well,
I mean, Ren Fair, you got to put yourself out there and pull people in, whereas Multiverse, people are coming to your table and they're walking by you. And I vended both in Author's Alley and in the Vendors Hall at Multiverse in different years. Nice. And I am really, really, really bad at staying put. In order to, people don't believe it, but I actually am introverted. And in order to go do these kind of things, I kind of like put on my extrovert suit, zip it up in the back, and hope that nobody notices. I love having a base of operations, of just kind of a place to call home, but I never stay there because I kind of go into overdrive. I just kind of let the ADHD take over and I just go. So when I was in the vendors hall, I was very, very unsuccessful vending because I was always out in the hallway with all the other authors and a lot of my friends and stuff. And because I will then use them as home base if my home base is not acceptable. The vendors hall is fabulous. Don't get me wrong. It's wonderful. And we did get put next to Mark Gunn. So that was really cool. I liked being in there. Whenever I was in there and he was playing, I didn't leave, but otherwise I'm a flight risk. But Multiverse is really cool because you have people walking by you all the time, talking to them. Every conversation at Multiverse feels like it goes a little bit deeper than it does sometimes at other conventions. So like every one of the conventions that I frequent, anyone that I've gone back to, I have specific things I really love about that con. For Multiverse, it's it challenges me a little bit more intellectually, because it feels like, and I think part of that ties back to the diversity. You have a different group of people coming together with different experiences, and so you start to think about things in different ways. And even like the little conversations that we have with people walking by and coming to our tables, they just go a little bit deeper sometimes, and it's really kind of a cool thing.
Do you find you use comparisons a little bit more at Multiverse because people will understand what they are?
What do you mean?
Like my book is like, Godfather meets fairies, kind
I
of
do
thing.
that everywhere. I mean, that's not necessarily specific to Multiverse. I mean, I call
But do you feel
Fairy
like there's a
Godmother
little
is
bit more
Jessica
of a nod or understanding to it than maybe say at like Ren Fair doing that?
Nope.
No? Interesting.
At Ren Fair, I mean, it's the same thing. It's Fairy Godmother goes rogue to hunt down the bastard who offed her first princess. It's like Jessica Jones with sparkle.
There you go.
I mean, it's usually I only add that last bit if I've already kind of got their interest a little bit, or if they're thinking about it. It's kind of the nail, the Jessica Jones with sparkle. It's, and I've got the same thing for Double Crossing the Bridge. It's kind of just locked and loaded, ready to go. And I also, I change up based on who I'm talking to, which book I pitch first, which way that I pitch it. Obviously, I'm not going to say bastard to a 13-year-old standing in front of me, but I mean, no. But
where we actually met for the first time was another interesting part of Multiverse, which I think is unique to Multiverse and I don't know why, because all conventions have like the bar time, they have the and if you are any success at a con, it's because you spent time in the bar, or you spent time
BarCon
networking. Yeah. But Multiverse has the fire pits, it has the beautiful atmosphere, and it just seems like there's just a nice laid back feel to it. And there's so many good conversations going on during that time. Is that a time that you cherish even as an introvert?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I mean, if it weren't for BarCon, I wouldn't be with Falstaff. So it is great. And there are so BarCon is a thing at pretty much all the conventions that I go to.
Yeah.
But some places I actually like Con Carolinas has a really cool outdoor area, but it's very spread out. So like I'd have a hard time locating where all my home bases were, and I ended up going up to bed. But some of that's probably my own awkwardness. So next weekend I'm going to try to be better. I'm going to try to actually like figure it out. But Multiverse does have a really good setup for being able to hang out with everybody. And I promise I'm not crapping on Con Carolinas. I love it. I'm going back.
No.
I don't go back if I don't have fun.
It's more just highlighting the aspect of Multiverse that's
right.
And it is. And the cool thing is like you can sit in one spot and people will come to you. And the spots, like you said, are so close together. So there's a lot, and there's just so much stimulation there and conversations going on at once. And I relish for that. I'm usually one of the last people that leaves that little area. But yeah, I really find that an interesting aspect of Multiverse that's very nice and different for it. Let's talk a little bit about you. I mean, you're not you've been writing, I would imagine, most of your life. That's pretty much all of our stories. When you find this, you don't let it go. It's part of you. It becomes who you are. But you're relatively a new author for in the aspect of you're just recently published and brought out there. And I'm kind of curious how the evolution for you of writing became. How did you become an author from those days of when you loved to write?
Okay. I wanted to be an author since I was in middle school, probably, but I would not commit to writing anything long. And I wasn't really into short stories either. I wrote poetry. I wrote very, very bad poetry for many years. When I got to high school, I was still writing bad poetry. I have incredible stage fright, believe it or not. I have battled through that through conventions. Even, yeah, it's bad. It was bad for a long time. I've gotten better. But I would still go in high school to our open mic night, Espresso Yourself, in the library of my high school. And I would go up there and I would stutter through my awful poetry, and people would just stare at me. I was on the school newspaper. I didn't get the position I wanted to get there, and so I was stuck being the photo editor. But then I kind of was really in love with the idea of changing lives through writing something. And I took myself way, way, way too seriously in the beginning. I wanted to write something along the lines of like the Celestine Prophecy or Ishmael or something like that. And yes, I was into I was into a lot of that stuff for a while. And I had this idea to collate all these little snippets of stories and poetry and stuff, because I realized that the thing that I am best at is being able to connect with people in a specific way. I can't really articulate it, but I thought that I was going to put this all together. I was going to call it Identify, and I have it. And it was like, there was a progression of a story, but it was like this weird concept thing. It went nowhere. And so eventually I settled on I was going to write an epic fantasy. And because, as you do.
Yeah.
So I wrote an epic fantasy called The Key of Argos, which was a lowball title. It needs a better title. It needs a whole facelift. But I was at that stage in my life, I didn't know if I wanted to fully commit to being an author or if I wanted to have a wildlife center. I did wildlife rehabilitation. I went and did an internship at the Wildlife Center of Virginia for a couple months, and I realized that wildlife rehab takes over your entire life. Like there's no resting. Once animals know that you know what to do, they show up on your doorstep, like literally on your doorstep. I took a bird to a play once with me. One of my best friends plays, and I'm sitting there in the stands with a bird in a box. Yeah. Took one to a swing dance. I got a squirrel once at a swing dance. Yeah. So I ended up when I met my husband, he was a bartender, and he decided he wanted to go back to school. I owned a house and had a job and everything, and I put him through school, and the plan was I was going to stay home with kids. And then after I got kids into school, I was going to focus on my writing career. And I'm very impatient. And I wrote the first book while I was pregnant with my first child. I wrote the second book while I was pregnant with my second child. And so I guess that kind of goes over the evolution in a really convoluted way.
Well, hopefully you don't have to spit out a child every time you write, I would hope.
Oh, God, no, we are done. No. But measures have been taken.
Well, did you find it easy to transition to longer fiction during that time period? Was it just you were not in the right mindset, right place, or did you feel like that it just was a natural progression, or did you just feel like I needed the right story?
I'll be honest. I worked for a local municipality, stormwater, and I was bored, and I was stuck at my desk a whole lot. At one point, I was doing 5 different people's jobs, and I was still sitting there for hours, like. I loved my job in some ways. I had a great boss, but I was really bored. I went back to grad school because I was bored. I took the what's it called, the GRE. I took that, and I scored higher than I had expected to score after being out of school that many years. And I got into tech, and I went to Georgia Tech for a few semesters and managed to get them to pay for it because I was bored. So when I quit doing that, there were a bunch of layoffs that came. There was a recession thing that happened. And so I was unable to continue to get them to pay for a degree I didn't need. I had more free time, and so I just kind of started writing at my desk at work.
So it absorbed you, basically.
I mean, I needed something else to do, and I could only do, what was that game with you have to hit the boxes and
the Minesweeper.
Yeah, I couldn't do that anymore.
I feel you. I understand that. That makes a lot of sense.
But I technically have a 4.0 at Georgia Tech.
Hey, there you go. Nice. I'm curious because you have very clever titles. You're clearly very clever, very funny. So, is that important to you in your writing? Is humor something that you gravitate towards? Is that something that you like to read? Is that like something that you felt like I needed to have inside even your fantasy worlds?
Yes. After the Key of Argos, which is it's a really trope-ridden, typical epic fantasy. It's got a decent story. My 9-year-old really wants me to finish it. I'm never going to finish it. I shouldn't say never, but I it's just not who I am. But I decided that I was going to do something just to give my just to make myself giggle. I was like, all right, what if I was watching Leverage at the time, and I'm like, what if a bunch of drunk trolls were trying to rob a bridge? And like, I wrote it as just to please myself. And I kind of found myself in that. As weird as it's a ridiculous book.
You kind of figured out your voice.
I did. I figured out who I am and what I want to do. Fractured Face series is a lot different than that. It's not over the top ridiculousness the way that is, but it still has a lot of humor layered into it. Because it's just, I have to say, the ways that I wanted to affect the world, I ended up kind of doing a little bit with Double Crossing the Bridge. It was so out there and weird. And Writer's Digest found me, and I did a blog post for them about leaning into your weird side. And I had so many people from all over the place message me and say that they really resonated with them, and it made them feel accepted for all their little idiosyncrasies or whatever, growing up being called weird all the time. And I'm like, wait a minute, I think I did what I wanted to do, but not with the book itself, but with just being me on the page and then putting it out there so everybody else could see it, So I thought that was just kind of a really cool roundabout way of accomplishing what I set out to do in the first place.
Yeah, that's awesome. I would imagine there's no turning back now. This is you're in it now, but you're for the long haul, I would assume.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yes, I'm currently working on. I'm about 20,000 words into Trolled, which is the sequel to Double Crossing the Bridge.
Oh, nice.
But that had been in the works for so long, I was a little bored trying to get it out. Even though the story is not boring, I think it's going to be good at some point. I was bored, and so I talked to John Hartness about it. He's my publisher and editor, and I told him, I'm like, it's like pulling teeth getting these words on the page. And he said to write the third Fractured Fae then, because the second one right now is in edits. And it's just coming out. I'm like, okay, I needed to do that. This is what I need to be working on right now. But yeah, once I finish Pixie Dusted, I will go back to Trolled. Hopefully there will not be another project. I have 2 more on the back burner, but they're not under contract. So
how many in the Fae do you think you're going to end up having? Have you made a plan for that?
I don't make a plan for anything. or I get bored.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. So Fairy Godmother follows Gwen, who is the fairy godmother who turns her back on her duties to hunt down the serial killer who killed her princess. And Fade to Black explores some of the unresolved things from Fairy Godmother, and it kind of completes Gwen's arc, her character arc. So then Pixie Dusted switches to her best friend Chessa and her point of view going forward. So I don't want to give any spoilers for Fade to Black since it's not even out yet. But there is a resolution with the main story in book 1, but the protagonist is so tunnel vision on the serial killer that she misses some broad things that are happening in the world around her. And it probably drives the reader a little crazy. And I resolve those in book 2. But book 2 is half Gwen's perspective and half Chessa's perspective, her best friend, who is introduced in 1. I mean, we have her in 1, but it's not her point of view. And then book 3 is fully Chessa after Gwen is already busy doing other things. So I don't think that's spoilery. So I could keep going.
Yeah.
I mean, I could keep going indefinitely as long as, Falstaff wants to publish them. And but I do have 3 under contract. There's none under contract after Pixie Dusted. So if people like it, they need to tell John he needs more.
Yeah, I think John's probably going to tell you he needs more, bro. But knowing John like I know him, this you're easily falling into the Falstaff, family very easily. I can totally see why you fit in there. But I'm curious from your perspective, what has John given you that you didn't expect that you kind of have found with doing things with Falstaff and doing things with John Hartnett?
Okay, so my first book came out from another publisher called Parliament House. And Parliament House is also an indie publisher. And I will be eternally grateful that they gave me my first yes.
Mm-hmm.
There were some issues. And I ended up pulling that book when the contract was up, when I had a break in the contract. And the publisher kind of imploded after that.
Mm.
Not because of my book, but because of some things that were already broken. And it has since been relaunched by somebody else. And so I'm not trying to tarnish them at all. I think from what I hear, she's trying to do some good things. But a lot of authors ended up without contracts after that. So some of my friends, so I'm a little salty about that. I don't know that buying off all the assets and then dissolving contracts and reissuing them only to a few authors is really a great way to start.
It's not a good sign to turn things around. Yeah.
Right. I understand. She was trying to make it manageable for her.
Sure.
Right. She was trying to salvage what was good about the publisher to begin with. But I don't know. I am a go kind of person. And if you didn't get that, but when I had a lot of like marketing ideas and things that I really wanted to do, and it was my first book. Parliament House asked for a marketing plan. I gave a fully detailed marketing plan with all the things I wanted to do. And nobody ever met with me and was like, Sarah, we're a small press. We can't do all this. We can maybe do this, this, and this. John is very clear with me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, can we do this? He's like, do it. And everything that I have ever gone for, he has supported and helped me blow up.
Nice. And
it is a completely different experience than I had to begin with, which was I would go for something and then the bottom would drop out on it. I say I'm not going to badmouth and then I go do that. But
it's all right.
But Falstaff has been super supportive, and it's not just John either. It's like the entire staff. My the two different cover designers I've worked with have been fabulous. I mean, look at this. You see this?
Yeah, it's really good.
It is amazing. And
the font on the title is awesome. That is just,
oh my god! I have an idea for what she's probably going to do with the second one, because we've been on the same page the whole time. I hope it's the same cover designer that gets the second one. Nice. But in editing, John is my developmental editor, but Misty Massey was my copy editor, and she is fabulous. And not only that, but the other authors, like the support that I get. I go to a convention and I have just all these siblings that are there looking out for me and helping me. And I'm pretty sure half of them would pull me aside and tell me to shut up if I needed to be told to shut up. Like it's fantastic. I can't wait for next weekend, so I get to see everybody.
Nice. Well, thank you for taking the time to sit with me here for the last 30 minutes. I really appreciate it. It was great getting to know you and talking to you, and we'll see each other next week, I guess. And, we'll see each other in October for sure. So yes. Thank you for being here. And, I wish we had more time. Come see me when you put out the second book. We'll talk more about it. We'll get deeper into the Fae series.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me. Come to Multiverse.
Yes, everybody come to Multiverse. And if you need another reason to come to Multiverse, how about a competition? Here's an interesting competition from one of Multiverse's sponsors, and then we'll be back with D. Norman. You write cool stories? Share them with the rest of the Multiverse. The 2023 sponsored Ink Publishing is holding a short story contest with prizes, and the winner will be announced at the 2023 convention in October. The story should fall within speculative fiction genre, such as sci-fi, horror, or fantasy. We encourage you to weave an engaging story with well-developed characters and deep emotion. Submissions are open to all multiversians who have attended the Multiverse Con or intend to attend. The guidelines are available on Ink Publishing's website, so make sure that you read the rules. The submission period goes until September 15th. It's one per author. Reprints totally acceptable. This is just for fun. Submission cost is free, and the word limit is 2,000 to 8,000 words. It's an anonymous submission with no author name or email in the document. The sole winner will receive a $100 American Express gift card, 3 signed books from our guests attending Multiverse in 2023. The winner will be invited to join the Inked Pub panel after the announcement. The winner and all finalists might be offered placement in an upcoming Inked Pub anthology if the themes align with their stories. It's because a story that's been itching in your brain or tantalizing your fingers, or you had one in the pipeline that you've wanted to see recirculate, and you plan on attending Multiverse, now's the time to do so. And go check out Ink Publishing for the latest in their anthology work. Good luck. May the writing be with you. And we're back, and I have the awesome Dee Norman with me. Hi, Dee. Nice to meet you. Thank you for being here and joining me for this. I'm real excited to talk to you because we're talking about an aspect that we haven't talked about yet on this show. So I'm real excited to talk to you about that because you have extensive experience with that. Plus, you've been with Multiverse since the beginning, so that's pretty awesome. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself, though, and I mean, I did a little intro, but please feel free to embellish and talk more about yourself.
Sure. So raised in an Italian-American family that practiced a type of Italian-American folk magic, which meant that by the age of 11, I was given my first tarot deck, which was my gateway drug to Western esotericism in the occult world.
That's awesome.
So I kind of took departure because you never want like what's at home. And so I took this dive into ceremonial magic for the longest time. But when it came down to finally writing a book on occultism or an esoteric topic, I went back to what my family does because I wanted when I was growing up, there was never a book about the practices my family did, and it made it feel less legitimate, that it didn't feel like a real folk magic because I couldn't find it in writing anywhere. So I wanted it to be in writing, mostly for my daughter. That's how I started. But over the last couple of years have been amazing for me. I have independently published a deck of oracle cards, and then last year I published my first nonfiction book on magic, and my first science fiction short story all came out last year. So I'm now living my dream.
That's awesome. I have to say, I love the Ouija board poster on the back wall back behind you there. That's fantastic. I love that.
There's an actual antique Ouija board back there haunting my house.
That's awesome. So it's just hanging. It's just
hanging out.
Yeah, nice. That's fantastic. I love it. I'm curious, as somebody who's been to every multiverse, what is it about multiverse that keeps you coming back? What do you love about it?
Well, I will say I have been to all but one because last year I caught COVID. Literally got diagnosed while I was packing the car. I took a test because we both felt under the weather, my partner and I, and found out I had COVID as we were about to leave. And then I went in my bedroom and cried for an hour because I wasn't going to be able to make it. But the reason why I was crying is a lot of the reasons why I come back every year. So the very first year I came to Multiverse, I was invited by my beloved sister-in-law, Paige Christie, who's been commenting in the chat. And she said, come to this convention. It's brand new. It's the first year, and just come and hang out with me. Even if you don't enjoy the convention. And I was a little nervous because I have been to conventions before, wandering around as a woman on my own and been made very uncomfortable. And I came away from that first multiverse not only feeling incredibly comfortable, incredibly safe, But having had both just attendees, but also guests who are sharing their knowledge, be so generous with their time, their knowledge, their expertise, and really that feeling of familia, the family, and
Yeah.
feeling like I belonged, even though I hardly knew anybody except Paige walking in the door. And that feeling of belonging is a big deal for me because I usually feel in a lot of cases like the odd man out and always have. So to walk into a convention with all these wonderful things going on and feeling like I'd be welcome in any conversation that's going is a really big deal. And it does make me want to come back every year.
So then you go from that to making presentations at Multiverse, part of the Learn track. Paige says, "Woohoo, D." um, so was that an equally impressive step for you? Was that the next thing for you, or are you more comfortable doing presentations and being in that environment?
I will say I'm very comfortable with that. I've been a corporate trainer for years by the time I did that. And I had been teaching esoteric courses and workshop for about 20 years before having taught my first or had given my first Learn Track talk at Multiverse. So it was kind of my thing. Before writing books, that's what I was doing.
There's something about the academics of the Learn track that is very fascinating to me. It's very much, there's just, there's a lot of, for lack of a better term, nerddom, and a lot of fandom, and a lot of expression, and a lot of deep conversations, and intellectual ones at that, about things that are supercilious and kind of, I mean, they matter, but they don't, in the grand scheme of things, you know what I mean? But with the Learn track, there seems to be a little bit more focus on the academia of learning and absorbing and being a part of that. Have you found that to be true? What has been the response to? What have people come to you and talk to you? Do you feel like that's a different type of connection that you get at Multiverse that you don't get outside of it?
Oh yes, there are a few other conventions I've been to that have a fairly robust academic track, but one of the things I like about Multiverse, talk about inclusivity again, is that the door is open for people who are experts, even if they don't have the academic credentials to be considered experts elsewhere. Because I'm a dropout. And so when I first applied for the Learn track, I was like, oh, my bio has no academic credentials, but they gave me the chance to share something I knew a lot about and that I felt really passionate about, and to share that with other people. And I find that very exciting, that people who participate at Multiverse, that door is open to them too, even if they don't have a bunch of letters behind their name.
And preparing something like that, to go through the process of how long it takes, because I have to imagine, I mean, obviously maybe it's a talk you've done several times before, so maybe it's not so much now. But when you first were preparing something like this, talk about how much goes into preparing a lecture, because it's an hour that you're 40 plus minutes you're going to spend basically talking for the most part. I mean, you probably do Q&A at the end or whatever, but for the most part, you're the one that's being focused on. So how much goes into that preparation and putting that together?
Well, I will say, for folks who are interested in the Learn track, there are actually 15-minute, 25-minute, and 45-minute.
Oh, so there's different increments. So.
Yeah, so if you want to get your feet wet and just do a 15-minute presentation, you can do that. But
forgive my ignorance, I did not know that.
Well, I just to put it out there, because again, that opens the door
really
for folks who maybe don't want to stand there for an hour and fill up an empty space for an hour. But it is, to me, the really biggest hurdle is to come up with the idea that I think is going to capture people's imaginations and maybe combine two things in a way that maybe they haven't thought of before, and so that it will attract the largest number of people to it, so they'll be interested in hearing it. And then it is figuring out the gaps in my knowledge and what research that I need to do in order to fully flesh out the idea and gathering those resources and that information. And then finally, the most amount of time for me is spent on creating the presentation and figuring out what teaching techniques I can use in order to get my ideas across to appeal to all the different varieties of learners, because there's all different types of learners. Some people are visual, audio, some people want examples, some people want to get their hands on things, which is kind of difficult to do in a Learn Track talk. But how can I appeal to as many different people, spark people's imaginations, and make the information I'm sharing as accessible as possible to everybody that's listening? So that is the part that I spend the most amount of time on is how am I going to take all this research that I have, these ideas that I have, and condense it and then present it in a way that is going to entertain and also inform people.
So there's an interesting thing that happens in multiverse panels that I've discussed with other panelists and people who have been on panels of the geek tracks and the different tracks. There's a feeling that you get from a multiverse panel that is unique, and that is that there is more of a not only inclusion amongst the panelists, but inclusion amongst the audience. And there's this more of this interacting aspect to it. It feels more like you're having a conversation amongst friends around the fire pit than you are being taught something or being lectured to. So is there a certain aspect of that with the Learn Track, or is it basically 25 minutes, here's what I'm going to give you, and then we talk about it after?
I think that all of the Learn Track, because the ones that I've presented, the ones that I've watched other people present, there has been such a wonderful array of topics covered in the Learn Track over
there's
the
some
years.
Incredible different topics I love.
It's been amazing, all the way from hard science type things to philosophical things to the history of. There was one on older horror movies that was really good during Multivirtual, the year we couldn't get together in person. But back it up a little bit to my very first multiverse, when I was not doing anything other than attending and walking around with big wide eyes going, look at all these amazing things. And I went into a panel that was on how to make your own playing card game, because I was in the middle of making an Oracle card deck, but I thought I could use some of this information.
Sure.
And only about 4 or 5 people came into the panel. So the panelists said, well, the heck with that. Come on up. We'll sit around this table. And so we had this round table discussion. And we got to ask all these questions pertinent specifically to what we were doing and what kind of projects we were working on. And that's how my Oracle deck came to be, was because of the wonderful knowledge of the people in that particular panel. For LearnSource, that is something that I do use at my job. For Learn Track, I've always noticed that there's constant Q&A available. Gaming and divination collide, I love it. There's always this give and take with the audience or with the folks attending, and they're participants. They're not just an audience that's sitting there and listening to you. And I've noticed that a lot of the presenters are very adept at adapting to the mood and attitude and interest of the audience and the people who are listening. So I think that makes it really special, because it is definitely a step away from just this dry, rigid, here I am, I'm going to present this knowledge to you, and then you will ask me questions later. It's a kind of veneer of a classroom setting, but there's a lot more, as you said, interaction and just a collaboration of people enjoying and digging into a topic together. But that is really almost every single panel I've experienced. So yeah. Learn Track isn't necessarily special in that way. Learn Track is special, but every single panel I've been to at Multiverse has been that kind of panel where I don't feel like I have a problem with asking a question or raising my hand or contributing a comment.
Yeah. And that's really nice to hear. It sounds like more like the Learn Track adapted to Multiverse than Multiverse adapting to the Learn Track. So. which is great. I love that idea. So, what have you been primarily teaching? Give people a taste of what it is that you teach at Multiverse.
All kinds of weird esoteric stuff.
Nice.
So I think the very first thing I ever presented, I'm trying to think, what was it? Women in the History of Western Magic was one. So it was a feminist view of how women were treated in Western magic and how they're sometimes made invisible, even though they've made huge contributions to our esoteric history. Another presentation I did was Base and Dishonest Ladies, which was a history of fortune telling in cartomancy and reading cards, and how divination is actually in the esoteric world kind of sort of looked down upon and kind of pushed to the side because serious esotericists don't have a lot to do with it occasionally. So I'm trying to think. And then last year, which I was sick, I got to remote in and still give my Learn Track presentation, which was fantastic. It's the only thing that made me stop crying. And that was a presentation on the evil eye in Italian American folk magic and how you, what it is as a concept, but also how you diagnose it and how you can cure it and all of that.
Nice. And I asked that question to specifically kind of bridge the gap to talking about you and what you write and how you write it, because that is part of something that you were mentioning earlier, that the book you put out and the things that you're writing about has a lot to do with your family history and the heritage that you come from, and bringing that to the forefront. And I'm curious, I would imagine you know a lot of that up front, but I'm sure you did some research to kind of round out the book and put it together. And I'm kind of curious, was there something interesting you learned about your family or your history or something in the realm of what you were writing about that you didn't know going into it?
One thing that I learned, because the thing is it's very interesting when you say Italian or you say Italian American. The Italian peninsula became Italy not really long ago and has been very, there's all these different regions of Italy. They all have their different take on all kinds of things, from food to culture to folk magic.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I learned mid-book writing is that I actually have family from Benevento in Italy in my ancestral tree. And Benevento is famous for the walnut tree of Benevento, where all the witches would come and meet. So I was super interested when I saw that. And I'm like, I'm going to just go back and rewrite this one paragraph and include that, because that's such a fun thing. And there's this history of all the witches of Europe coming and descending upon this one walnut tree. And then this one kind of annoyed bishop chopping it down and building a church on it to make sure the witches would stop coming to town. But finding that out mid writing of the book was just a really fun fact for me.
Nice.
But also I did a lot of talking to other practitioners and finding out how we were so similar yet had such marked differences, because by the time it comes over to the US, Italian American practice really gets handed down through families, and each one has their own little twist. So there's an evil eye cure. It involves prayers, but every family has a different set of prayers that they use, and they hold these specific pieces of information very close, and it's very secret because it's what sets their practice apart from other families and other regions. So finding out the variations amongst practitioners was really fascinating as I was doing research. And that has only increased now that the book's out, and I'm talking to all kinds of practitioners from all over the US who have an Italian American background. I'm finding out all kinds of fabulous things. And that has been one of the most fun things about the book for me, is that it has widened my reach, and I have been able to talk to other practitioners and find out what they do.
That there's, I hate to use the word stigma because that's really a bad word in this case, but there is certain things that people assume and people think about when you mention the word witch, or you mention practicing witchcraft or anything like that. And I'm curious, from your perspective, what is the one thing you would really like to be completely debunked and put out there that you see all the time that you just go, people got it all wrong?
I think, well, there's one thing that is so hard.
Sorry to narrow it to one, but I only have so much time. So.
Right. So I think that there is a differentiation between magical practice and religious witchcraft. There's a huge difference between the two, and that witchcraft is not, say, related to Satanism would be the two things that I wish people would realize. It is, it is so hard for me. I've come from such an odd perspective because it has so been woven into my life, these folk magical practices. I try really hard to put myself in other people's shoes. If they're looking from the outside, how off-putting it can be to hear words like magic and like witch and like the occult, and all of those words can be very scary to people who aren't familiar with them. But it just takes a little bit of reading and a little bit of knowledge to go forth and kind of find out the facts, or at least find out that there's a lot of variation. And I will say, I'm not saying there aren't satanic witches. There are satanic witches out there. There are witches that worship the Greek pantheon, the Roman pantheon, there's all kinds of witches out there. But I think the hardest thing it is for people to understand is that not all pagans, magicians, witches fall under the same umbrella. It is very fragmented. And so you kind of have to ask are you a good witch or a bad witch question? And 99.9% of the witches I've met have all been of the good witch persuasion. So
yes, Paige, just one. I'm sorry, I only have time for
I'm
just
sorry.
one. I know Dee can wax poetic probably about a lot of things that the trouble, the soul about witchcraft and the misconceptions, I'm sure. But I mean, at the end of the day, you wrote this book, you put it out there. What was your aim? Was it just to get the history out there, to get where you come from out there? What did you feel like was the real reason why you wanted to put out a book about your heritage?
Every time somebody talks to me, every time I go on a video cast or podcast like this, I tell myself I'm not going to cry at this point.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you cry. I'm so sorry.
There's two things. I have been urged by both sides of my family tree. One was the birth of my daughter. And my grandmother, her great-grandmother, passed away when she was 4. So she did get to spend time with my great-grandmother, but not a lot. So I wanted to capture a lot of the practices that I grew up with that she wouldn't necessarily hear from my grandmother or from my mother. I wanted to get that down on paper. The other is that my father passed away a few years ago. And since I was about 6, he has been saying, Dee, write a book. And he was really with me throughout this entire process. All the significant dates for writing the book fell around dates that were significant to him: his birthday, the day he passed. Everything fell in line with him, and I felt him with me the entire time. And so, there's a big thing when you talk about folk magic. There's a line that goes back in history, but that also goes forward into the future. And I just wanted to be a link in that chain in a way that was emotionally and it just felt true, significant to me, and it felt true to me. And the book started out, I thought it was going to be a little chat book I self-published, and I by chance ran into an agent who got me a publishing deal with one of the oldest esoteric publishers in the UK, and the rest was history. But when I talk about the book and family and how family made it happen, if you look in the acknowledgments of the book, I thank the Multiverse family in the acknowledgments, because without the input and encouragement that I got from all of them, the answers, the questions that they answered, the just emotional support that I received from the world of Multiverse. I don't know if I would have been able to do it without them.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to sit here with me and talk and chat and share your experience and everything like that. I would love to talk to you more in depth about your heritage and everything that it means to you. And I promise I will try to keep it so that you don't cry too badly. But I really do appreciate you sharing that beautiful sentiment and emotion with me. That really means a lot. And congratulations on the book and everything that you're doing. And I look forward to I'll try to make sure that I can come and see you do your talk. I think that's just fascinating, right up my alley. I'm a big guy. I'm a big person who really embraces theology, embraces spirituality, embraces a lot of that stuff. So it's right up my alley. So I would really love to see it. So I will try to make a point of doing that. And thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And I guess we're just going to have a drink at the bar in October
Yes.
and talk about all of these things.
Absolutely. Let's do that. I appreciate it. Let's do that. I want to do that really, really, really much. Yes. Let's do that. All right, everybody. So just one more piece of business, and that's to meet everybody. Like we're talking about, let's meet up at Multiverse. And here's a great place to do it. With probably one of the funniest things I've ever seen in person. I'm sharing it with all of you right now. This actually did happen at Multiverse. And I'll be right back to wrap everything up. All right. Here you go.
Now, another reason why, among many, you should be attending Multiverse. Reason 1006, the Meet Track, hosted by Gigi Ying. This is a neat little space at Multiverse in which like-minded folk gather to talk shop, to intellectualize, to get together and say hello, and sometimes even to do this.
Game of Thrones.
This is going to go on continual after dark.
What are you waiting for? Join us today. Go to multiversecon.org and register to become a member of the Multiverse.
Look, you hear me say it each and every week on this show. You hear me say it all the time out there to everybody. If that doesn't make you want to come to Multiverse, I don't know what will, because that it was just so amazing to experience. I was literally I was on the left side of that, where you see it on the left side of that video. I was sitting right there. Literally, AJ almost fell right in my lap. It was pretty amazing. That was just such a great time. The meet aspect, what Gigi does there is phenomenal. I highly recommend it. You're going to find something that you gravitate with a bunch of people for. It's a very safe space. It's a wonderful space. And it's just like a sewing circle. Just sit there, you chat. Yes, spontaneous jousting events happen, but they just, that's going to happen anyway. That just happens, right? But that being said, it's been a wonderful show. I want to thank Sarah and Dee for joining me. I really appreciate both of them coming on and talking about their experiences and themselves. And I hope that you guys enjoyed it. And I hope that if like I said, if that didn't convince you, I hope that tonight's show did. And with that, we say it's always time to go indie now. And we'll see you guys on Sunday for This Week in Indies. And I'll be in Carolina next week live too. So really check that out. And I'll be going live every once in a while there too. And we'll be doing a live This Week in Indies from there as well. But that being said, it's always time to go indie now. And we'll see you again soon. Bye, everybody.